right. So I'm connecting to YouTube Live. Okay.
Okay.
It takes some minutes. All right. Some seconds, depends. All right. Okay, now we are on YouTube. So just hold on a second. You can see the slide, right?
Yes.
On PowerPoint. Okay.
Oh, what is the YouTube link? Okay.
I'll let you know in a second. Let me see if I can begin the recording. Okay. So we'll begin the recording on Zoom too right now. Okay.
All right. Okay.
Here we go. Just hold on a second.
¿Te podemos echar una mano con algo, Juan? O...
Okay. Okay. Here in Comics, we're here in Comics in Dialogue, and we're happy to be with us, to have with us Ulli, who is one of the most celebrated contemporary authors of comics and graphic novels in German. As you all know, Ulli was born and grew up in Vienna, although he moved to Berlin in the mid-90s, where she studied graphic design. She's best known for her autobiographical graphic novels, Today is the Last Day of the Rest of Your Life, and How I Tried to Be a Good Person. She has also worked in an adaptation of a literary novel, Flughund, excuse my German, by Marcel Weger, again, excuse my German. And this book was published in English as Voices in the Dark, and it hasn't been translated into Spanish yet. Okay. Another dimension of her work, which is not as well known, is documentary, non-fiction comics. She also runs, I believe, the digital comic publisher electrocomics.com, and she's working as a lecturer of comics and illustration at the University of Applied Sciences Arts of Hanover. Okay, so welcome, Ulli, and we're going to begin our conversation right now. I think you can see the PowerPoint presentation that we prepared, right, for you. Okay. So the first thing that I wanted to talk with you is about your childhood. Okay, you grew up in Vienna, right?
Yes.
Okay,
right.
You went to school there.
No, sorry. No, I grew up in the countryside.
Okay.
I came to Vienna when I was 15.
When you were 15. Okay.
I'm a very village girl.
All right. Okay. So the first question will be when did you see, okay, that you really wanted to become an artist? Was it that when as a child, or later on in your life?
As a child, it was a big dream because I was in the family. I was the one with the fantasy, a big family, and everybody has his qualities. The one is the clever one, the other one is the sporty one. I was the one with the artistic talent. But it was a rural family, and you had to learn something useful. Art is not, yes, you cannot eat art. So my family didn't have a big understanding for the wish to spend your lifetime with something useless as drawing images. So they accepted it, but I didn't get a lot of help.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But at that point, was it when you moved to Vienna, or even earlier that you knew that you wanted to be an
I
artist?
tried to be a textile designer. I came to Vienna to attend a school for textile and fashion design. I did this for 2 years. That was a nice preparing for sketching and drawing, but it's also something very useful. And later I discovered that I'm more a storyteller than a textile designer, and I was looking for these different fields like theater, film, or visual storytelling via drawing. And the drawing won because it's the most autonomic job. I can sit on my table all alone. I don't need the theater. I don't need the other people. I don't need the money to make the film. I don't need all the the technical stuff like camera and this. I only need the pencil and the paper, and I can build worlds with it. It's the same experience like a writer, only I add the images.
Right. Was it then when you became interested in comics and graphic novels?
Mm.
Right.
Then it took a very long time until I was able to convince other people that I can do it. Yeah. I started drawing comics with 28, and I think I was like 30. I was around 40 when my first real book, my first comic was successful. Yes.
And you have like some favorite comic book authors or not? I mean, you have like some kind of references, like international or national, Austrian or German authors that you especially like.
Let's say I don't have a big connection to the classic comics, the genre comics as superheroes and fantastic comics. I got interested in comics when the alternative comics got big, when artists like Robert Crumb or also the Hernandez brothers, or I like stories which are not only about genre or superheroes. I like normal people's lives stories. Everyday story, and autobiographic comics are a big thing in the alternative comic scene too. I was very inspired by that.
Right. Yeah, we don't see you like writing about superheroes or.
I have one superhero. I have one female superhero. She's called Air Pussy, and she can fly when she robs her pussy.
Right.
Right.
You see. So then you moved to Berlin, as we said, right? In the
95, yes.
In 90s, okay. And you experienced all this artistic scene, that was really interested in the 90s, after the Berlin Wall fell down, and so, like Berlin was the place to be at that time, right? Okay.
Yeah, in Vienna, it was very hard for me to connect to the art scene there. And in Berlin, I arrived there, and it was like it welcomed me with open arms. If you want to play around and do stupid experimental stuff, then Berlin was just very open-minded and welcoming for other artists. And I was surprised that I can sit in the bar at 4 o'clock in the morning and still have interesting discussions with strangers, what would not happen to me in Vienna, where everybody is very in Vienna, the people are a little bit
narrow-minded.
more frightened about strangers, or you have to be introduced by somebody before somebody else trusts that trusts you. And in Berlin, they were all very interested in. I mean, it's a big international community now.
Right.
Berlin.
So you feel a how do you say it in German? A Berliner, you know?
I think now I would love to be a Berliner now. Yes.
All right. So I mean, we have talked a little bit about your childhood, you know, and your first interest in comics and so on, and so on. We know that you have prepared for us like a presentation, you know, about your work and so on. So you can show us your work, and we can ask you questions about your main books, you know, your graphic novels and so on. Let me just leave this presentation, and you can go ahead, you know, and show us your slides, right?
All right. So what we have here is this book which I mentioned before, the one which which came out when I was around 40. It's a teenage story which I experienced with 17. Why doesn't it go now? Yeah. And what I wanted to say was I didn't plan to draw autobiographic. It was not my intention. I was just more a storyteller in my drawings all the time. And after I moved to Berlin, I discovered documentary drawing, like drawing from everyday life, drawing people on the streets or in the underground. And I was super fascinated by faces. I always loved to observe people and to observe how they behave with each other and their little signs which they are giving you apart from the obvious mime stuff. So looking at people and drawing it got my new thing in Berlin. And I started doing comic reports like graphic journalism. There was a book about shopping centers, because after the wall came down in the east in Berlin, there were like 100 shopping centers opened during 1 year, and it was these big crystal palaces were an interesting object to study because the reality, the audience of these shopping centers doesn't always fit in the scenery as well as the advertisement. You know, the wonderful, glamorous advertisement world clashes a little bit with the audience, which they want to invite with their images. Yeah. So you see, I was interested in real life, and then I was trying to find a comic story for a bigger book, for a longer story. And I tried a big book about a theater in Berlin, the Friedrichstadtpalast. It didn't work out. And then in total desperation, I realized that there is one story in my own life, which is quite, which has the potential for a book. So I overstepped the pride or whatever and started drawing my own story, and suddenly I became an autobiographic storyteller. Yes. So this is the book, and it came out now. I think it's 11 translations, different languages. It's a story about two girls, which are two punk girls in the 80s in Vienna, and they decide to tramp to Vienna to go hitchhiking to Italy. Sorry, to Italy because they wanted to stay in the south over the winter, and the whole plan was just to have an adventurous and wild life. Yeah, and we didn't have money. We started this trip just with the clothes we had on, and I think a second underpant and 50 cents in our pocket, and no passport, of course. So we had to cross the borders. Back then there still were borders between Austria and Italy, so we had to cross the border illegally, and yeah.
So I think we talked about this shortly before we started the live, but this is because people have even asked me in the library, is this all real? Did all of this really happen? Because a lot of things happened, some of them nice and many of them not so nice. So they want to know, did all of this really happen to these girls?
Yeah, that's a good question. Before I started the book, I was not sure if I should make it open that it's a real story. I was thinking it could be just a fictional story, no problem. And then I don't have to be so, then it doesn't then it doesn't show me that naked. I could say, no, it's an invention. But then we realized that it's different for the audience when they know, but it's happened. It really happened. And there are some decisions in the story which I as an author wouldn't have made. I wouldn't have had the idea that this girl should react like that. And in real life, I had some stupid reactions, a lot, or other people reacted stupid, and I wanted to just show that part. And I would maybe I would be more ashamed if I would to invent such stuff than just to experience it and to tell it like it is. So the decision to talk openly about the fact that this is a real story was also a concept decision. So yes, you can answer the question with yes, I try to, it's my concept to stick with the truth, even if it's very uncomforting or also not that perfect for the narration. Because sometimes, for the narration, it would have been better if, I don't know, other events would have fitted better for the ending, for example. I could have had a glamorous ending.
It's not a linear story. It's just like they go here and then they go there and then this happens. So it gives that feeling of, no, this is probably real because it's not, this is how life is. It's not a plot, life is plotless. So basically, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, when and how did you come to the decision of telling this story? Did you have any intention?
No, I said I was desperate. I failed with the other idea which I had, and there was one moment where I told this story to some friends, and my boyfriend, my partner, Kai Pfeiffer, he's also a comic artist and author too, and he started insisting that I should make this story. It took him something like 1 or 2 months to convince me, and then I just did it because I had no other option. It was just a good it's true. I thought, it's good material for a longer story, and I really wanted to make a big book. That was my plan. I wanted to have a story where the reader spends a lot of time with it. I didn't like these 80 pages comics where you read it in 1 hour and then that's it.
So previously you have never thought about writing a story about your life? It
No,
was like
never.
a decision that you took.
I was ashamed. I tried to hide. I tried to to clean it up a little bit for the market.
Right.
And then it came out that this dirty backstory of my teenage time is a very good. It helped my position on a strange art market. Yeah.
But at the same time, I think that you were really brave, because you touched on some issues that no or not very many people have dealt with before,
That's the surprising aspect. Maybe I should introduce this to the audience now. So what is the story about? It's about 2 very emancipated Viennese girls which travel to Italy, and there they are welcomed enthusiastically by the Italian men because they are 2 17-year-old teenage girls in their full bloom. And one of them, Edie, loves to fuck. That was her hobby, having sex with guys, and it was not my hobby. So we got split apart, and after like a month, I had to continue my journey alone. And then it got very disturbing in Sicily because the attention of the men was terrible. It was too much. It was really awful. They were just like eating me alive. I got also raped. It was not very nice. That was the point why I thought it's important to tell this story. because of these experiences as a female in a patriarchic, archaic society where they don't take you as a person, but just as something they could chew up and spit out. They
Right.
you don't get respect. I'm surprised that it was that this story is not just common and often described in literature, because it happens so often.
Right.
It's normal day life for women.
Right.
It got better when I aged. The age of a 17, the 17 years old age is really bad. The girls in this age get super much, really too much attention.
But when you look back to this trip, do you, apart from the the most sensitive issues like the rape and so on, do you look back like with regret, or you are happy that you really took this? I mean, you went embarked on this adventure, on traveling, without money to Italy, and Sicily and so on.
Absolutely. I totally regret it as an adult, as a mother, to have done this to my parents. That's what I really would love to not to yeah, take it back. But I love to make the experience, and I did never ever want to miss it. And also that I just made the break with the social
Right.
yeah, that I just didn't follow the path which my family had thought or planned
Right.
before. That was a good thing.
Yeah, your family thought that you were crazy, right?
Yeah, totally. and I mean, they right to be worried. It was very dangerous. And the reason why I just survived it so well and I was able to also overcome the traumatic experiences was because my family still is a very healthy and nice family, which always, in the end, showed me that they love me and that they help me, that they stay behind me. They didn't kick me out of their
Yeah, I mean,
band.
your family was right, and because I mean, it was like really dangerous. I mean, you were
Very
related,
dangerous.
you were related to like the big bosses of the mafia,
Yes.
right? In Sicily, like, my God.
Oh my God, yes. And just like, oh yeah, try heroin, of course. I mean, terrible, very bad. Yes.
Right.
But I didn't like the heroin, actually. I didn't like it from the start. And I was happy that I felt bad when I took it, because that gave me a good reason to say, no, that's not good for me. Yeah.
Right. Because when you started this trip, I mean, it was like an open journey. It's like you didn't plan to. I mean, you didn't have any plans, right? It was like just traveling
It was
around.
so fantastic. I mean, that's the best ever, that you just go. You make the decision, I go, and then you just go and you try to grow with the experiences. That was the kick for us, to just survive. It's the same kick like you decide you go straight in a straight line through a landscape. You have the plan. Okay, my plan now is to go in a straight line through this area, and if there is a river or if there is a fence, I go over the fence or I go over the river, but I keep on my plans. It's a crazy plan and it's exciting to do it. And that's why how we felt with 17. And I was thinking back then that I have to learn from the real life, and we were punks. We wanted to do everything different from what society expects. We were fascinated by the dark aspects, and we were fascinated by criminals. That's why we stick with the mafia and bandits and that stuff.
But when you were, I mean, living this experience, were you aware of like the real danger that you were exposed to?
In the night, when I was in the house of the mafiosi, and I was very that was yes, I was aware of the danger, but that was in a moment where I couldn't when I was already inside, like this scene which I show in the moment. It was the scene after the rape where I was very desperate.
Yeah.
And I was very frightened. but I never thought about going back. That's a big question which always comes from readers or from, I don't know who it is, but they always, and there was a film production company, they write a screenplay for a film, and they also wanted to write the scene where I take the telephone and call my parents that I want to go back. And I told them I never did it. I never thought about it. I wanted to, I was like this hero in the journey who wants to fight the dragon. And if he goes out and if he comes back without killing the dragon before or having any victory, any small victory, then it's a failure. So I would never have returned in the darkest moment, because then it would have felt like a failure. I had to go over it, and somehow I think for me that when we left Sicily in the end, it felt like I won against the mafia bosses because they didn't get us or something. It felt like a little victory.
Right.
If it would be a fictional story, I would have written a better ending, of course.
You said that before, and I found that surprising, because I really liked the ending where you see what this whole journey has done to this young girl, in the scene where she just sits in this very, the house of her parents, and there's a shower and there's a bed, and then she actually, you would think, wow, this is the first time she really sleeps in the bed since months and months, and she gets out of the bed and sleeps on the floor, because this is what she's used to. That's where you see, okay, it's going to take her some time to get back to normal life, because this is what you see also in documentaries and films about, like, prisoners of war and military people and stuff, that they also don't feel comfortable surrounded by comfort. So I would say I love the ending particularly.
Thank you very much. That's good to hear. That's a relief. Yes.
So did you, because you said you had the support of your family, but you didn't go to like therapy or any of that?
No, I got pregnant
okay.
like half a year later, and then I was at home during pregnancy.
Okay.
I was not. My mother convinced me that it's a good thing to get the baby, and it could live with them in the beginning during when I go to school or whatever. And so I was at home for 1.5 years to get my son and also to feed him and all this stuff. And then I went back to Vienna. But the time at home was a very silent one, a very quiet one. I was actually the whole time in the house. Yeah.
Do you keep in touch with some of the protagonists of this story, like Eddie, whose name is not real, I believe, or Andreas, and if you don't keep in touch with them, would you like to see them again?
I met Eddie like 3 years or 4 years later, and Eddie, she was what is it? Farid?
She betrays.
She betrayed me in the end of
Right,
the story, right? I mean, Edie is the one who really loves to fuck around, and she also loves to take heroin, and she liked to be a prostitute in Sicily, and she was deported back to Austria like 1 week before I returned, or 2 weeks before my own return, and my mother was called by the police that she's back, and this girl tells my mother her own story, that I am still in Palermo and I am a prostitute in Palermo taking heroin. And I was 2 weeks later, I came back, and of course I did none of that. And my mother was very, very angry because that's not the story you want to hear. And I was very angry on my friend Edie because she put these images in the head of my mother. That was terrible. That was a terrible thing to do. She in the talk she met with my mother and her own mother, and she told the story like she would be me. She turned around the roles and told the story like from the like she wanted me to stop with the heroin. All I did to her, she turned it around and told it to my mother in the other way around. So I was not happy to meet her again, but she just greeted me like, "Hey, didn't we have good times 3 years ago? It was nice, yeah." And I said, "Yeah, it was nice, but in the end, you didn't act so perfect." But she was just a little bit stupid. She was really very stupid. And I saw her in a documentary film like 10 years later, and she was talking even more nonsense than I think she took too much drug in the meantime.
And you didn't hear from Andreas again?
No, unfortunately. I would have loved to hear what happened to him.
Right.
I would have really liked to know.
Right.
But
so, I mean, you talked about a film version of the graphic novel.
yeah, unfortunately it's an expensive film because it's historic. It plays in the 80s, and it has a lot of places where you have to film. So the company wasn't able to get the money to film it. It's too expensive for them.
Okay.
They need other partners, whatever.
Right. Okay. But hopefully it will be filmed in the future. I think it has a great potential, you know.
I would love to have a Netflix series, actually.
Yes, that's what I was gonna say. This is totally a Netflix series.
Oh yeah, please tell it to Netflix. We are in discussion with them since 1 or 2 years. There are always sometimes companies. It's regularly, really, since this book is out there. Production companies asking me for the rights. I already sold it to. I gave it in a moment to this Austrian company, which did a very good screenplay. But also, as companies associated with Netflix, they ask me about the rights, and still it didn't work out.
We'll start an online campaign.
Yeah, please.
Campaign for this film.
Yeah. In the moment they think about doing an animation movie, but I love the real movie. Actually, I wouldn't like it to be an animation film. Let's see.
Right. Now that you are a teacher at the University of Hanover, right? Okay.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Right. Do you miss those days when you could freely go around from one place to another? You know,
I changed completely.
Without money.
I changed completely. I don't want to go out of my apartment anymore. I love to stay here and to draw my stories. I don't want to experience the adventure anymore. I had enough. Now I like more the quiet.
All right. Okay. I don't know if Ana Maria has any other question about this book.
No, I actually have some questions about your next big book. So
we can move along then.
Yeah.
I can move along. Yeah, that's the next part of the second part, let's say, because there is also another autobiographic book about when I was between 25 and 28, and the focus is on a relationship with 2 guys. I wanted to show that it's possible to have a relationship at the same time with 2 men if you make it open and with open-minded people. Unfortunately, this relationship didn't end that well. One of the guys, he forgot the open-minded part and got very jealous and violent. And that's also one part of my life where I thought that's interesting material for a novel.
Okay.
So there's a lot of sex involved. I liked that story because in the first part, in the Italian journey, I was a 17-year-old girl and I had quite romantic ideas about sex, and I didn't like it that much back then. With 17, it was actually too early. My body was not ready. I can say this now when I understand how it feels when the body is ready. And here with 25, I found it important to talk about female sexual desire. That's why I made this book, and I wanted to show beautiful sex scenes with my lover. he was a guy from Nigeria, African guy, which of course the graphic quality of the two colors. As an artist, I like to show it too.
Well, you actually just answered my question, because my question was if it was really intentional, because also the sex that is shown in your first book is mostly, not always, but mostly negative or violent or, you know, unwanted by you. And this is the opposite. This is someone enjoying sex. And I think it's not very usual to see female desire and sexuality expressed so beautifully and so graphically in the literal sense of the word. So but you did that on purpose. You told a story not just because it's the next part, but because you also wanted to show this specifically.
One part of the problem with being a female is that it's more easy to be open about your desires if you're a man. You know, for a woman, it's much more difficult to just be freely without and to have a healthy relationship with your body and your needs. The society in the last 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 years, whatever, was very oppressive for our needs and was always telling us to put it aside for the bigger picture, your virginity, your marriage, or whatever social needs. So female sexuality is something that you should not express, otherwise you are a whore. I mean, it somehow it continues the Italian story, you know. And nowadays we understand that sex is something very healthy and good for our body, and we should praise it and party it and not make a bad, dirty problem out of it. So my book is also praising female lust. Yes. that my mother has that my name is unfortunate in that context.
No, why?
I didn't. It's not my only focus, you know. But for this book, it's a big one. Yes.
Since you talk about your family, I mean, and your parents, what do your parents think about your books?
My parents they don't read comics. It took them 2 or 3 years before they read the first book, only because they heard so much rumors about it. So they wanted to see what, but they just don't know how to read comics. That's my good luck. they get introduced in the content by other family, other relatives, and because these books are the root of my success, they accept it. They don't get it really in their head that these dirty stories give me a professorship at the university. It's somehow not. It doesn't feel right for them that I had a bad behavior and I got. That my bad behavior was, belohnt.
Rewarded.
Awarded, right. Thank you for the word.
It was a good behavior in the end.
They are still a bit shy about my professorship. When I'm on the countryside with my family, nobody talks about my job at the university. It frightens them because I am the bad one where they look from up down, you know, and now they get nervous because I'm a professor. You know, they are like farmers. They don't study.
I think this is very Austrian. Austrians are very keen on titles and on this is Frau Professor, this is Frau Magister and stuff like that. So that's...
Even me, when I got my new passport, I wanted them to put the professor in. I was thinking maybe it helps at some moments. Maybe there might be situations where it's good to have a professor in your passport.
So speaking about professor, do you think, because in Spain, I think graphic novels are still viewed as, you know, not really serious art or even a serious profession, although there are a lot of good artists who also make their money like this. But do you think this is the same in Germany? And what do you think could be, done to push like graphic novels forward as to be taken as seriously as film or as, I mean, pop music or other art forms?
The audience we have is not big enough yet, but in Germany, the cultural, the media already acknowledged that the graphic novel is just like literature, like what you have in a normal novel, like in literature novel, you have it as a visual graphic novel, but they understand that the content might be very complex and not just narrow-minded. They understand that it's a complex literature, and the reviews, you have a lot of reviews in good newspapers nowadays. The bookshops don't know where to put the graphic novels because they put the comics in the children corner, and then they get confused if there is a book about the Holocaust. They think that the audience looks for the comics in the children corner. So they need to learn that there is also this adult literature graphic stories which they can put next to the normal novels. Yeah.
Okay. All right. We have around 15 minutes left in our conversation. Anybody? Yeah.
Sorry.
Just 1 second. Anybody who wants to ask questions to Ulli can do it through the chat on YouTube Live. Okay. But we can follow along and talk about this adaptation, right? Okay.
Yeah, because
literary work.
It's a good next point. You see, this book is an adaptation of a novel of Marcel Beyer, and it is published at Surkamp, which is a big, renowned German publisher. We have also the word Surkamp culture. Surkamp is known for the best profiled authors in Germany. And if a publisher like Surkamp suddenly decided to publish comics, then there is a paradigm change in the cultural system. So this is a novel, this is fiction. It's a mixture between fiction and real figures. The children of Joseph Goebbels and the mother, Magda Goebbels. It's a story about a sound technician who works for Joseph Goebbels, and he meets the daughters, the children, and the whole story goes over like 3 years. And in the center is, of course, the scene where the children get murdered in the bunker by their parents or by whomever it was.
This is what made you decide to do this project, because this is a really, really dark book. I mean, I read the novel by Marcel Beyer, and it was, okay, but I had a lot of trouble finishing the comic because
Really?
yes, it's really tough. So what made you decide to do this project?
It took me also half a year to decide to do it because of the darkness. I was thinking also, do I really want to spend 3 years of my life in this atmosphere? But I found it so fascinating and so intense. The construction of the story is great. I think historic comics is something that interests me. I love to draw history and to reinvent these scenes. And I found it so fascinating, the voices of the children of Joseph Goebbels. They were so innocent, and they were like in the center of the Third Reich, where it was somehow calm. There was a big storm around them, and terrible things were happening, but they don't really recognize it, or they see the little signs and they describe it. And in the end, they get killed also. I mean, they get eaten by the storm too. But I found it a fascinating perspective angle on these incidents, and it's also a little bit surrealistic. It has some fantastic parts where it's obvious that it's fiction.
Right.
I found it interesting as a exercise to try. Yeah.
Would you like to go on like adapting novels and short stories and so on? Or
So my plan was to do a third part of my autobiography. Only the problem was that some protagonists don't like me to do the comic, so I cannot. I was fortunate to the first books that in the second book, the protagonists, they allowed me to tell this story. They agreed, but in one, so I had to find another subject, and this is an old book which is somehow related to my new subject. When I was like 30, I did a serial of comics of little booklets. They were published every spring about the spring goddess, which is looking for her lover, and then she finds him, and then the summer comes. It's a adaptation on mythology, on Neolithic mythologies about the female goddess. And back then I was very interested in the healthy sexual attitude to develop that. And now when I'm 50 years old, I'm more interested in the autumn aspect of this female role, of this female figure. And now I'm drawing, this is not from the book, now I'm drawing a comic essay about the history of early human art, because the main figure of the early human art is the female figure, which has a big focus on the breasts and on the genitals. And it seems a very healthy self-image of the prehistoric women. So I make a historic essay now about archaeology and biology, and I draw scenes of the early hunter-gatherers. Now I draw a scene where they make the Venus of Willendorf, and I will draw a lot of mythology and try to compare it, and hope to raise awareness for the fact that history started before letters were invented. Because that's what we call prehistory. We forget that it is part of our heritage too. And it's still very strong, and there are a lot of interesting aspects in it, and that's what I'm trying now. Yes.
all right. So you want to continue with autobiographical books, right? Okay.
I cannot. Yeah, I try. I had one more story, but it's not possible to tell it. That's the point.
Right.
But
Well, maybe something.
They don't let you.
Yeah, they don't let me. Maybe when she's old. It's a she. She doesn't want it. She maybe when she gets more relaxed, or maybe I just have to wait a little bit more.
Right.
Or maybe something else will happen to you. There's
something else interesting.
Yeah.
Let's see. Can't see it in the moment. Maybe afterwards. Maybe I could say something to the image which I have here. That's just a little work. I was in Haarlem in the Netherlands. They invited me to stay there for 2 weeks, no, 1 month, and I was drawing some imaginary report about Haarlem in 30 years or something like that.
Okay.
Netherlands, they lie, the half of the Netherlands is under sea level.
Yeah.
And they are still buying houses and building houses. There are construction places everywhere. And I think, wow, these Netherlandic people are so optimistic. And so I was thinking it's a nice serial, like what will be their future?
Right. And didn't you have the temptation to write biographies of other people? We had a conversation with Reinhard Kleist the other day.
Yes.
Who seems to have specialized, in writing biographies of musicians, of sportsmen and women and so on. Is that something that you would like to do?
That's definitely an option. I find it quite interesting. It's like my own biography. It's a combination of documentary drawing and historic storytelling, and that's why I find it interesting. I didn't see a person in the moment where I think I really have to portray her. I found Magda Goebbels quite interesting, but it's so ugly to I don't want to make a whole book about this terrible woman. Yeah.
All right. So I mean, if you decided to take that step, it would possibly be a woman.
Of course, because there is so much literature about men. They are so over dominant. We don't need more of it, really. it's enough. We need to put more. I mean, there is a focus. There's a lack of focus on female biographies, and so.
Right.
The point with historic female biographies is that the stories are often very frustrating because these women were always confronted with a lot of constraints. So historic biographies, female biographies, are often very depressing. That's why I decided to go behind this type of history and go to prehistoric events and think about how might the early history of humankind have looked like, because there are new thinkers now which don't think that humans necessarily have to beat each other up when they meet each other. It's also possible that our ancestors were peaceful for a very, very long period of time because they were only few and they liked to meet each other sometimes and share animals and stuff, and they didn't have to be afraid so much about each other.
Okay. We have some questions from our audience. Okay. One of them is from Andre Hochemer. Excuse my German again. He's a translator, okay, of among other things, Spanish graphic novels and comics to German. Okay. Hello, Ulli. Thanks for your works and this nice talk. As a translator, I would like to know about your relationship to your translators. Do they ask you questions during the translation process?
Yes, some do and others not. I didn't. If there are only few questions, it's also a very good experience to discuss the misunderstandings, because there are always mistakes. German is a very complex story, and words changes their meaning if they are in other relations. I mean, the German language might be quite complicated. So it's good to communicate with the translators. But I also had one translator who had questions all the time. He was sending me one email after the other, and I was giving him a very rude answer, which I'm ashamed about now. Yeah.
All right.
I was thinking, saying like, what kind of a translator are you if you don't know the answers to this question? But that was very rude of me. He just wanted to be more in contact.
All right. Okay. So there you go, Andre. If you want to answer to what Ulli said, you are welcome to do that. And we have another question, okay, by another member of our audience. How is Austrian culture and lore portrayed in comic art as distinctive from the German ones?
One moment. Austrian culture portrayed in art?
In comic art. In comic art.
There are not so many Austrian comic artists. I mean, there is Nikolaus Mahler and Leopold Maurer, and there are some few women. Their voices are not loud enough in the moment. It's a very small scene. But I think the Austrians, I love Austrian art and culture because of our dark and bad humor, because we love the shameful aspects of life and we like to portray them. I think my work is very, very Austrian.
All right. Okay. Since you're talking about authors, Austrian authors and German authors and so on, you still like reading graphic novels by your fellow comic book artists?
Absolutely. I read a lot of books from the young artists nowadays. It's so interesting to see what kind of problems they have.
All right. Okay. Could you recommend us a writer to?
Oh, I
to...
liked very much the Swedish girls, like the Swedish authors. Sorry, I shouldn't call them girls. It's my mistake. I loved Liv Strömquist, of course, and there's a new one which is called Moa Romanova. Swedish female authors. I can hardly recommend them. They are good writers, good storytellers, and have very strong opinions.
All right. Okay. Well, we have 2 or 3 minutes left. I don't know if Ana Maria wants to ask some other question.
No, actually my question was about your favorite author. I don't know. Do you? I actually had one question, but you have answered that. Why do you think it is? I mean, I'm not talking about superheroes, although there are some very good superheroes comics out there. But why do you think that, especially in German culture or in European culture, but especially in German, I think graphic novel and authors focus so much on reality? Is there like a fear you won't be taken seriously if you do fantasy? What do you think it is? Or maybe, I don't know.
Let's say the successful books are the ones with the real stories. There are also comics. Also, there are very few alternative independent comic publishers, and the program, I would say it's mixed, half fantasy, half real world stories, but the documentary storytelling just gets so much attention. If you want to have an article, a review in the newspapers, then you should not do any fantasy story, because as good as it may be, you don't get the journalists to write about it. That has to do with the dynamic of media. They sit in their meetings and they say, what subject is relevant? This and that. Domestic violence. There's a graphic novel about domestic violence. I write a review about it. You know, that's that. We are happy that the newspapers write articles about comics now, what they didn't do like 20 years ago, and it's very, very important.
Yeah.
All right.
And I for example, I love the real life documentary drawings. I just don't like the fantasy stuff anymore. But my absolute favorite author, or my favorite book in the comic world, it is From Hell by Alan Moore. And it's also a historic comic. It's he does this interesting thing. He did a lot of research about Jack the Ripper, and selected the version which he found most convincing and added some imaginary aspects to it. And that was a perfect comic for me. I just loved it. Yes.
Well, you know, in fact, reading Flughunde made me feel like reading From Hell. Like, oh my God, I feel like, you know, it gets under your skin.
Cool. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, From Hell, it's a real masterpiece. That's such a incredible book. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, but I think you had that same effect with Flughunde.
That's fantastic to hear, because that's what every author wants to hear, actually. That's fantastic. Yeah, I wanted 2 books like him. Maybe it was because it was one of the first comics which I have read, which were not the typical genre stories. And it was a big novel, big book. Yeah. I love big books. Yes.
Yeah, me too.
All right, Ulli, I think we're going to stop here, you know, because there is another session at 4. Okay. It's been an honor and a pleasure to have you in our conference. You know, really interesting. You know, to talk about your books. You know, to see how similar to reality they are. You know. And about your experience, you know, in Italy and some other places, you know, and how you see those experiences, you know, from now, no?
Yeah.
So thanks very much, and we hope to see you in future editions of Comics.
Yes. Thank you so much for the invitation. It was nice to be in Madrid virtually. Yes.
Hopefully, sometime soon you can be here personally.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you
Okay.
very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.